Hello, welcome to the October 21st, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through okay as expected, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a second. Hello, welcome to the October 21st, All right, so my name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the live stream today, and I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products in the United States. I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you live. It's always fascinating to see where people are from throughout the world. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply send questions in advance to or just simply submit the questions in the chat field. So we'll try to get through all the questions chronologically as they were asked. And if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if perhaps you could try to wait. Often I'll be behind the actual questions. And if we could try to avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be very helpful for that. It just kind of slows down the whole process. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you have, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or if it is on Mac or PC, and what version number, such as 10, 10.5, 11, or 12. That information would be helpful. And if we should have all of the topics covered in today's live stream available with timestamps that will be pinned to the top of the comments field. So you can look for that as a reference. But if you wanted to search for over 21,000 questions that we have answered in the live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com and you could search there, and that will take you immediately to the particular spot of one of the over 250 live streams that we've done. So we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for that. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees, not officially associated with the company, other than they just want to make it a more wonderful place for people to interact on the live stream. So we're going to give special thanks to them. Also, we want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for all of his efforts in working with the CubaseIndex.com, working with the Cubase Nation Discord. So that's another wonderful resource of information that's available as well, and in addition to all the official Steinberg channels. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first question. Greg, I have a Kurzweil K2500 keyboard with 8 faders. I would like to control my orchestral template. Fader 1 equals CC1, fader 2 equals CC1. I would like that faders 3 and 4 to control the effect send level. In my case, 3 different reverbs and faders, 6, 7, 8 will control mic position, mic close, main, and room. For each instrument that I have created, it has 3 different mic positions. For example, Flute 1 has close mic, mid mic, and room mic. Is it possible to do that? Can you please show me how to do that? I'm using a Midi track and not instrument track. So I guess I can't reach the send effects parameters in Midi track. Don't understand what's the difference between generic remote and quick control. How will you set it up? Okay, so probably what I would do, and I think I was just kind of messing, it's obviously a bit easier if you're working with instrument tracks because the audio is tied directly to the particular to the particular track. So right now when we do MIDI tracks, I have, let's say, a violin part here. And let me just turn this up a little bit so we can hear it a little better. Okay, so as we play, so we want to have, I would maybe, use a combination of quick control. So, since a MIDI track doesn't necessarily know where it's audio, source is. When we have a MIDI track as I play, we can send MIDI directly to this particular track. And as we are working on it, the audio is going out of the audio return channel. So as we come directly over here, we could see that we will have the MIDI comes into here and the output is going out. So I would go to the quick controls for some of the parameters. So here I just kind of have this set up, and I just saw this right before, where we could have our quick controls kind of set up to do. So let's say if I just wanted to add MIDI CCs, a lot of times if you just have, you may not necessarily have to remap these. If your controller keyboard is setting up MIDI CCs and is transmitting, I think you had mentioned CC11 and CC1 on the two faders, Cubase will capture that as MIDI data. If you need it to send it as a quick control, I'll just start with a brand new quick control preset here. So if you wanted to do it as automation, what you could do is just say all CC and just say I want to do expression, and I want to do all CC, let's say modulation for quick control 1 and 2. So we could control these from any of the devices that are kind of configured as quick controls. But if the instrument just receives that, you don't have to map that as particular, as a particular MIDI CC, because in the quick controls, because it's going to respond to if your first fader on your keyboard is transmitting. In most MIDI controllers, I have something of the same era where you could pick what each slider is transmitting. So as you do that, set slider 1 to do CC11, slider 2 to do CC1, and then if we wanted to do our different effect sends, at that point we could set up kind of an overall generic remote. And at this point, I would say, okay, we want to go to the effect send for the particular track. And if we wanted to control this with the fader box, what I would do is let's come over and I'll just open up my MIDI remote editor so we could see this. Okay, so I'm going to move this, and what I want to do is to assign this particular fader, and we're going to do this in the MIDI remote. So just to kind of illustrate this, so we'll come back to the mix console, and I'm going to just select the parameter, and I'm going to say pick up for MIDI remote mapping, move the fader, and apply the mapping. So I could just come directly there, and let's say if I go to MIDI, I want to pick this up for MIDI remote mapping. I move the fader I want it assigned to, and let's right click on the send level, and I can move the fader and apply the mapping just like that. So now as I adjust, we'll close this window, I could adjust my different effect sends just accordingly. Now, when it goes to the particular instrument, depending on what instrument that you're actually using, a lot of the instruments will allow you to just remap particular MIDI CCs. So if you wanted to, like a lot of them, and I don't have Contact on my system, but if you just I'm sure there's something similar, like in Hallian, I could just say learn CC, and then I could just move a particular knob to adjust particular parameters. So I could assign the close, the deca tree in different mic positions using these 3 faders and turn these on and off. Use my middle faders to control the send levels and then I could, with quick controls, use, my faders 1 and 2 to control the actual MIDI CCs. But this you may not need, because if you just have the controller transmitting those, you don't really have to assign those into quick control. So you could actually kind of do a hybrid approach if you're doing MIDI tracks. And again, it's because the MIDI track itself is decoupled from the actual audio, and the audio part of the instrument. With instrument tracks, this can all be consolidated. So if you wanted it to be consolidated, so you could do, treat like faders 1 and 2 just as whatever they're transmitting, assign quick controls, or assign just remote controls for your effects, and then within the instrument assign the MIDI CCs from fader 6, 7, 8 to change your mic positions. If you're using the same instrument, it's basically whatever you would do that would automatically keep those assignments. So I would, if you're going to do MIDI tracks, I would just simply use kind of a hybrid approach for that. Because if we say, my MIDI track doesn't have any effect sends in it, but an instrument track does. So give that a try and let me know how it works out. Okay. Okay. So we have a question. I see. So question, if I change tempo, every MIDI following tempo, but audio tracks are not following, is there a way to solve that? Is there fixed settings for this, or do I need to change it for every project? So, it could depend on every single event. So let's say if I wanted to go to a particular track here, and what you need to do is, audio in itself will generally kind of play back straight in, the same amount of time as it was before. So what we could do is a couple of different approaches. One is to go to the pool window, and you could just hit Control or Command plus the letter P. Come over here and let's select all of the audio files, and you'll see musical mode, and you want to make sure that there's a tempo value. So as Cubase records the audio in, it will be tempo stamped. So once it's placed into musical mode, and we could also select, another way of accomplishing the same thing is to select all of the audio events, and then we'll see musical mode that we could turn on and off directly here. So as soon as I want to play back my tempos, and I could now just come over and adjust the tempo. So right now we're at 100. And if I want to just double click and set a different tempo value, say 124, all the tracks will automatically just, I'll go to 92. We'll just speed up and slow down with the MIDI. So try placing all the tracks into musical mode. And again, you can do it in the pool window. You'll see musical mode, make sure the tempo is set correctly. Or just select all the events and put them into musical mode, and then change the tempo, and audio and MIDI will change accordingly. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden saying hi. All right, and we have Mark Winslow just saying aloha from Hawaii. Thanks for joining us. Robbie Bowling from Dallas. Uno Momento is offering everyone a pint of beer for the weekend from Finland. Thank you for that. All right, we have Patrick Becker from Germany. All right, we have Benny from Sweden. All right, we see that Filter Freak is checking in from the hospital. Says he can't miss a live stream. Well, we hope everything's okay and you're doing well. We hope that you don't have a long wait at the hospital. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index, Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas, Gerald Ely from Martinez, California, Mark Mitchell from Atlanta, Georgia, Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida. And his question is, And of course, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay. Is there a way to calculate to see the total time duration of a project while it is in bars and beats? How many minutes, seconds have surpassed while in bars and beats? So let's say we're in bars and beats here. One way to do it is, just you could add a ruler track. And as we go to the ruler track, we could say for the time format, I want the ruler track to be in seconds. So this could give you an idea of the seconds. There's also kind of a large display time. So if you wanted to go to your studio menu to more options, there's a time display, and we could just set this to seconds as well. So as we play, you can see that if you have, in Cubase, you have a primary and secondary time display. So I have my primary set to bars and beats and my secondary set to seconds. So when we do that, if you hit the plus key, or I'm sorry, the period key, directly, it's usually on American keyboards, above and to the right of the space bar, that you could toggle back and forth. So if I had like a file that was like the whole length, I could see the duration of particular file. So I could see the length of it here in bars and beats. I could say, okay, that's 85 measures, 1 beat, and 57 pulses. But if I hit the period key, we could actually just see the length change of particular events as well. So if you just hit the period key, you could toggle back and forth if you have those different views, or just use the time display, or utilize a ruler track. So let me know if that's helpful, Rob. All right, so a question from Matt Elder. Hey, Greg, I'm having trouble with my Behringer X-Touch 1 control surface. A few of the buttons don't work with Cubase 12 Pro. It only works in Huey mode. Is there a way to get the others working? So generally, if you're setting up with, I guess, with the MIDI remote, if the buttons aren't transmitting MIDI information, it's going to be hard for Cubase to access that. So if you go to a MIDI track, let's say, and you have that connected, and go to the MIDI monitor plugin, see if when you are moving knobs and sliders and different buttons on your controller, see if it's actually registering here. Some controllers may have buttons that don't transmit MIDI, but may communicate with other protocols where MIDI isn't fine enough resolution, maybe for scrubbing, stuff like that. So see if you actually have a way to, if it is actually transmitting MIDI information. So if it's not transmitting MIDI information, there's not much to do for it to communicate with. All right, so we have Greedo Kenobi saying hi. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Mark Mitchell, who's just asking, bought Nuendo and have had issues in getting MIDI remote to map the mod wheel correctly with sounds loaded into Contact 7 correctly. So if you're just, recording modulation data from your controller, usually you probably won't have to actually set up, to set it up to do MIDI remote, because the instrument will just kind of respond to whatever particular MIDI control that you're using. So, let me know if you're trying to enhance the sound with using the modulation wheel on particular patches in Contact. If that's the case, you don't have to utilize it as a MIDI remote control. We can think of the MIDI remote as actually allowing us to use, to map functions in the program from incoming MIDI messages from a controller. But if it's just responding to standard modulation data, there's no need to actually map it through a MIDI remote. So if you could let me know, Mark, exactly what how you're utilizing the modulation wheel, that'd be useful. All right, we have Marvin Earl checking in from Newport, Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us today. We have John Costigan, very loyal attendee from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have a question from Benny in Sweden. Is there any setting that causes the reverb to turn off when I'm not playing my music and turn on when I'm running play or record? Hope you understand what I mean. Cubase 12 Pro. All right. Okay, so that causes the reverb to turn off. Okay, so just reading this again. Is there any setting that causes the reverb to turn off when I'm not playing any music and turn on when I'm running play or record? So if you could, I'm not sure which audio interface you're running. So, if it's a UR44C, or if it's like a UR series, if we have our mapping created here, with the with the UR interfaces. So say if I go to my audio connections, and I'll just set some of my inputs here. And I'm going to place my UR in direct monitoring. So as soon as we enable this, that you could have the reverb enabled here on that's powered by the audio interface. So you might hear that. So Benny, if you could let me know which audio interface that you're using, and it could be maybe the reverb that's coming in on the audio interface. All right, so we have Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Captenergy Music, just curious, I noticed that Cubase Live 1.1 was just released. Is this the product Donny Osmond uses in his show? So I think he does everything in Cubase, and the program is VST Live. So, but it would be like a wonderful solution for Donny. I'll have to give him a call and make sure he's seen it. But I think he's had his shows set up in Cubase for so long. So, but at least he'll be able to take his actual Cubase projects and import and export them. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is there a way to widen a stereo track without using a stereo widening plugin or duplicating the track? Cubase Pro 12. So, I think the first solution that I would, if you have a stereo track, I'll just play this as just like a stereo 2-track file. When you go on a stereo track, when you go into the mixer, you could have kind of a combined panner. So this, if you have a stereo track, you can kind of make it narrower sounding or wider sounding here. But if you wanted to sound wider than kind of the full stereo spectrum, I think you would have to, the easiest way is to use a plugin like the Imager plugin. So I know you mentioned you didn't want to use any plugins, but it's the easy way to kind of come over and be able to take kind of all of the frequencies and be able to, and this is kind of a multi-band imager. So if you wanted stuff to be very narrow, like in the low end, you could just choose, so I think that's there's not many consequences unless, I know early kind of stereo widener plugins would kind of introduce a lot of phase issues, but I think the new ones work quite well if it's not already panned all the way. So I think the easiest solution would be using like a plugin like Imager. All right, so we see Mr. O checking in from Cali, Colombia. Thanks for joining us. And wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to make the Scale Assistant global, i.e. To all the project is now it only works inside the MIDI editor? As soon as I leave it, it goes back to all the keys being free. So, it's going to be on, so it's not going to be global in that, it's not necessarily going to take an audio track from major to minor or, switching to a Phrygian mode, different elements like that. So it's going to be kind of set up to be, to be on particular MIDI tracks because the MIDI track lends itself to and audio within the very audio editor. But currently it would have to be done on a track by track basis or a part by part basis. But if you have a chord track, so let's say if you have a chord track on a particular part, you could have your monophonic audio and, MIDI parts automatically follow the chord track. And then you could do editing only kind of within the chords. You could have each one of the tracks and you could select multiple tracks to then follow the chord track, but it's not technically the Scale Assistant, but it might get you to the same place at the end. All right. So we have a question. Hello, Greg. I create an effect channel to send the reverb to the voice, but when I listen to the reverb, only to have control when equalizing it, it does not allow it. Why? So you could do it using the listen bus. So let's come over to a different project here. So if you wanted to only, so generally when you solo, it's going to solo the source that's feeding the effect and the effect. But we'll just take a listen to it here. All right, I'll just do it where it's even more obvious here. I'll just do a new project. All right, so let's say I just want to now come over and let's add an effects channel to this selected track. So let's do Revelation. Okay. So now if I solo the effects return, it solos the source. But if we just click on the L, now we're only listening to the reverb. So if we wanted to apply EQ to just a reverb, so again, if you just on the reverb on a return channel, the effects channel, if you click on solo, you hear the original source blended. But if I just click on the L, the listen bus, and this is when utilizing the control room, that now you can so clicking on the L will just isolate the reverb by itself. So solo will have the original destination is feeding it, and then L will only listen to the particular track. So if you don't have the control room set up, you would need to go to the audio connections and select the control room, and you could right click to add a monitor. And at this point, just have your audio routing there. You probably want to then go to the outputs and set that to not connected, or could be doubly bussed. So again, just instead of clicking on solo for the effects return channel, just click here on the L for the listen bus. So just right here, and then you're only hearing the particular reverb. So give that a try. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer's back from Buellville, North Carolina, who did his trip to Sweetwater. Hope you had a good time. Had a nice tour. All right, so we see from Noah, who's asking about the remote control. It just says, I don't have the remote control. Is there any other way to use the method that you've shown? So if you want to do, so let's go back to that. So if you're in 11, you could set up kind of a generic remote. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. All right, so let me activate this. So in the so if we go to Studio Setup and let's go to the generic remote here, I could say fader 2, and we could just kind of learn. Then you could say, okay, let's go to, so let's say fader 3, and then we want to go to VST mixer, and then let's see if we could. Let's see if we could do it here. So we'll do selected channel and select the device here. Let's try VST mixer. Okay, so and then here you could just go to sends 1 and just say level. And then so you can go to VST mixer. You want to choose selected, and then you could go to sends to level, and what you need to do is just do a learn and just kind of move your Kurzweil fader, and then set like whatever you have selected here, select the same number, and then you could just do a learn, and then you could set sends 1 level, sends 2 level, sends 3 level. And then often you could go, and you might be able to just come in here and say, okay, I want to go to this particular plugin, and then you could have different automation parameters where you might be able to switch depending on how the plugin reports the parameters, and if they're automatable for switching between the different mic positions, that you could set it up directly there using the actual generic remote. All right. All right. So you just see question. Just find it again. My chat field just jumped. Says, I'm currently recording my death metal tracks in FL Studio, believe it or not. Are there any real major advantages to me switching to Cubase? Been thinking about it for a while. So I think, I don't know FL Studio, but it always seems that it's, like even if you kind of say believe it or not, that it's kind of, you probably know it's not the best tool. So it seems like it's very kind of predisposed for workflows from like videos I've seen, where it's only going to be doing like particular types of workflows well, whereas Cubase, I think, is a broader palette. So, it's going to have wonderful guitar amps, fantastic drum editing, drum replacement. So if you're doing like multi-track drum quantizing, which is something that's often used in death metal to make it super tight, Cubase does that very well. Plus, it's kind of a broader palette of plugins, I think. So I think it's kind of a more well-rounded program for you. So. All right, so we see Mark Winslow is offering to the community, I guess, chocolate-covered macadamia nuts or poi from Hawaii, your choice. I always like the macadamia nuts and take advantage of those when I'm in Hawaii. So, all right, so we see from Rob, just says, thanks, Greg, for the help with the ruler track and time calculator options. All right, so Robbie Bowling is just asking, what is the most effective way to add a stereo effect echo in a mono track like vocals or guitars? It's really, so, if I wanted to, let's just jump back to this project. I'll activate it. Okay, so I have a mono voice, and really all you have to do, so let's say I want to add like another echo on this, is just right-click, add effects channel to stereo track, and I'll just add like a ping-pong delay, and I'll make the configuration stereo. That was okay. And now what I can do is just go to the sends. I was so naive. So now it's a mono track. It's going to a now stereo. You're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history. So I'll make this. Laid out on the floor. I've got to choose. So just it's a right click to add an effects channel track to it. You could even just go to the sends, right click and add an effects channel. So it's really, just as easy as adding an insert. So if you have an insert on a mono track, it'll be mono. But if you want it to be like a stereo effects or quadraphonic or surround, just right click and then you could add an effects channel track to just in the sends, and that will give you your stereo as you heard. All right, so you just see a comment from Matt Elder saying they all worked on Cubase 11. So I guess that's maybe with the Behringer remote. So I'm not sure if it's if you're doing it in the Midi remote, that obviously wasn't part of Cubase 11. But let me know if that's what you're talking about. All right, so we see, have you had success mapping an Ableton push in Cubase? I know lots of people that are kind of running it. I believe it just transmits MIDI notes, so it shouldn't be any problem with mapping it for different remote control functions. All right, so we see PZ136 just got his internet back at last, so it's great to see you back on the live stream. All right, so we see from Best Korean Jesus just says that his messages aren't showing up. So I had sent, so this to Best Korean Jesus, I had sent over the video from, I think it was last Friday's live stream about, after slicing loops. So the team at Steinberg is investigating it. But one thing that they had mentioned to try, and this might be an easy fix, and you could experiment and maybe let me know if this is helpful at all, is when you go to the instrument itself and go to options, try to, one thing that they were wondering is if you deactivated show tooltips, if that had any impact on the crashing with the when slicing and working with the mixer. So maybe Best Green Jesus could try that out and see if that has any impact. And if, sorry, your messages aren't showing up. So, but keep trying, or maybe if you want to send me an email, I could keep an eye out for the emails. All right, wonderful to have Mark Rabin just says, wonderful to hear your voice and wisdom. So it's great to have you back. You were part of our trivia questions last week for our 250th live stream giveaways. So, and the first question was, what is the name of Mark Rabin's dog? So, Nick from UK had gotten that. All right, so we have Damir G checking in from Houston, and he's hoping that everyone's doing great. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is there any way to disable root key on audio events or MIDI parts once a key has been set? This is concerning as it prevents the events to be excluded from the transposition. Is that a bug? So what you could do is, if you don't want audio to be transposed automatically, I think if we select, you can say root key here. So let me just, I think that there is, I'm just going to move this up so you can see it, but there is, on the info line, there's a follow global transpose. And then you could just choose that to be independent. So if you have drum loops that you don't want to be, or loops that you don't want to follow different transpositions or, different chords, you could just set that to be independent as opposed to follow the global transpositions. So try setting that. If you don't see it, go to the setup window, and then you should see, follow global transpose, and then just, you can make that so it's visible and set that to independent. I think that will do the trick. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on the live stream. Of course, my okay. So you see for Michael Pierce, it says, today I managed to help a friend to create polyrhythms in Cubase, tuplet mode, and a Quantize editor. But we did also ask, what does the E button stand for? Editor, edit. So I think it's just edit, or open up a particular editor. But in general, just edit. All right, so wonderful to see the monk beats on as well. All right, and Monk Beats has a question. Is there any way to open and close the show hide VST QC menu of every plugin with a key command macro, or better with a Midi remote map? All right, so I guess it's if we go... Just open up a quick plug-in here. So all right, so let's see if we can map it. Yeah, I don't see it as a key command, but let me take a look in the Midi remote. Yeah, so I don't see a key command for that, but I'll make sure to mention that to the team. Sorry about that omission. All right, so we have Val Lee checking in from Vienna. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Cubase X also joining us. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine question, where is the band compressor? I know I saw controls at one point, but can't find them again. So if you just go to under Dynamics, you'll see a multi-band compressor. So this allows you to divide the different frequency ranges and do compression on your upper mids or the highs, or lower mids or lows. So maybe that's what you mean by band compressor. So look at, and you can see a number of different multi-band plugins. So there's a multi-band, channel strip, compressor, envelope shaper. If you go to Squasher, that's multi-band as well. So let me know if that's what you're talking about. All right, so you see, hi Greg, from Gerald Ely, question, can you add an automatic wah effect with the FX modulator? So let's come over here and take a look. So let's say if I wanted to, so let's say I want to take this drum loop here, and I'll just put it into a loop. And let me try just to come over here. All right, so a lot of times, you know, we could think of that as maybe like a filter is in essence what we could think of as kind of a wah pedal. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and then you could have different shapes. So to be able to kind of do some different aspects like that, and I'll just make this a little louder in the control room. So try using just a filter, and then you could say, so you could probably do stuff like that. So I would play around with and, you know, try to use the filter because in essence, that's kind of what a wah wah pedal is doing. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from the Monk Beats that he was number 85 in smashing the like button. So that's great. Appreciate that. If you learn a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get notified. All right, so we see Alex Morgan's question. Hi, Greg. Is there a project logical editor setting one could make where all plugin inserts on the stereo out are opened via key command? Can't seem to program. Thank you. So I know that there's ways to, you know, if we have a number of plugins, so let's say if we had a mastering chain here, I'll just drop some plugins in. Just drop some. All right, so let's say if I want to do this, that you could open up, I think it's hitting the E button with like Alt and Option plus Shift, I think opens up all of the plugins. I don't know of a way. I think we tried to do this in a live stream maybe a couple weeks ago to do that, to map that to a particular key command, and I don't know of a way to do that other than kind of, I think the only way to do it is, you know, you could close all the plugins from a key command. So if you go to Windows, we could say, let's close all plugin windows. But I think on any of the tracks to do it, that it's not keyboard shortcut addressable. But I'll take a look again, see if anything kind of jumps out at me. So let's go to the project logical editor. right, so we'll say, let's take the effect, and let's say the track. All right, let's try this. All right, let me look at this particular function in key commands and see if we can find it there. Yeah, so once they're open, I know some people will set up like a workspace with all their master section plugins and be able to recall that. But we can, even though it says show/hide plugins, I think that's not going to do it for the selected channel, but I'll try. We'll try a different approach. Let's say our property is set to channel is selected. All right, so I'll just try a different project here. And we'll try this because I think it might be tied. All right, so I'll just tie this to frequency, EQ. Okay, and I'll close that, and we'll see if this, I don't think it's going to work. Yeah. Yeah, so I think still the only way to do it with is, and I passed this on recently, is just to, like on this selected track, is just to hold down Alt-Shift and then click on the edit button, Alt-Option+Shift, and click on that. But I don't think there's a way to do it from the Project Logical editor, unfortunately. Sorry about that. So you see, will there be a new version of Cubase for my Atari Falcon? Yeah, we're just waiting for the new OS update, and as soon as that comes, I think we can see it. No, I don't think there'll be a new version for, but I assume the question is in jest. All right, so we just see from Noah, it just says the K2500 is connected with a MIDI cable. There is no USB, so it doesn't really matter how it's connected. As long as there's MIDI going in and out of the system, a way to get MIDI from your K2500, then you should be all set. All right, so we have a question. How can I stretch the video in conjunction with the audio on a video track? I want to ensure that they remain in sync at all times. So generally, we don't do a lot of, there's no stretching of video, no time compression of video. The, predominant workflow is that the video is always going to be, is not to be altered, that you're composing to a particular thing. Inevitably, there will be edits that will come. But Cubase itself, we could do some basic editing, like cutting some parts out, but it doesn't do like time compression of video. So, and you generally would want to use a video application for that. Okay, so we have from Best Green Jesus, it says, question, I've been trying to create a project editor, I guess a project logical editor, to select tracks with muted events and hide them, but had trouble. Do you mind taking a look? Okay, I'm not sure if you need to select the tracks or just to hide muted events. So let's say if I come here and I'll just mute some events. So I'm not sure if you need them hidden or if you need them to be erased. So let's say if we want to come here, let's say media type is equal to event. Or let's see if we can do container type is event. And property is set to event is muted. And let's choose this to transform. And we want to say okay, let's try to set this to select. And we'll choose edit delete. So let's say if we want to do this, we want to take muted events and delete them. So let me know if that's what you want to do. So what we did is we just chose to select. Container type is equal to event. The property is set to the event is muted. And then in the post-process comments, we just went to edit delete. So so let me know if that would help. I'll just save this as a preset for later. So once we just have these, and I'll just mute other events here as well, so it's not just. So just come here. Yeah. So let me know if that is what you want to do. So it's not hiding them, but just deleting them. All right, so Mr. O is also wondering who else is moving from FL Studio to Cubase, and he finds that mixing and mastering Cubase wins every time, so that's great. All right, so we have a question. From Valley. It says, so is Control Room somehow adjusting everything dB-wise? I have it on plus 0 dB, and my mixes suddenly are very quiet when exported. I haven't had this problem before I used a Control Room. So the Control Room value doesn't have anything to do with the exported mix. We can think of this as just the monitoring path. So like if we look at our levels here in the master fader, that the master, and this is kind of what the exported volume is. This is just the monitoring volume. So it's going to be something else that's causing the disparity in gain and not the control room. So maybe, so check to see, like, as you're working on a project, that you'll see kind of the gain structure of the mix that we see here, and this is just our monitoring path. So maybe if this is louder, and then you're compensating for it with adjusting your stereo out volume to compensate. So that's what could cause a change once introducing it, but it's not going to affect the gain structure here. So make sure your master fader is set accordingly, and what you want to do at this point is just have this as your monitoring level. So it doesn't have any effect on the exported file. All right, wonderful to see David M on. So he's so glad to make Fridays. It sets him up for the weekend. So that's great. See, Uno Momento wants to update for his Atari Mega ST2. So yeah, I think I need one key on my Atari Mega ST4 keyboard. So. All right, wonderful to see Nick on. All right, so we see question, how can I make the pitch change when I time stretch an audio event? All right, so let's say I want to take this guitar part. So I'll just choose. So if we put this, I'm going to select the event, and we want to switch its algorithm to, we'll say, to one that says tape at the end. So I'm going to switch this to Elastic Pro Tape. And now when I'll put this to sizing applies time stretch. As I apply the time stretch, now as we listen to it, the pitch is changed. So if I wanted to come over here and say, let's make it like half the speed, well, as we play it, we'll now have the pitch very high. So as I adjust the length, the pitch will automatically adjust just like an analog tape machine. And if I just put this into a different time stretch mode, let's say elastic time, the pitch is the same whatever I do my time compression at. So as we just But once it's in tape, we'll notice that the pitch will go up. And if I slow this way down and listen to it again. So again, the secret is just put it into the tape algorithm. And then as you stretch, everything will automatically stretch, just kind of like in analog, like in a sampler or analog tape behavior. All right. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so Benny had sent a question that he was getting a reference error message when starting Cubase up. So I think what the error message is and I asked, I think, an email if you had if you had the particular Nuendo trial version. Nuendo will have some additional impulse responses for like post-production scenarios. Like, okay, this is a car, inside an office, inside a larger room. So more kind of typical environments for rooms. So I think what the message is that the impulse responses for Nuendo, and I think you mentioned that you had a Nuendo trial version, that those messages are indicating that the impulse responses for reference from Nuendo aren't licensed, but they're probably still installed in your system. So I don't know if you get a chance to uninstall Nuendo, if you've done that, but I think that's just all that message seems to be indicating. So, all right, so we have Da76 checking in from Stayner, Ontario in Canada. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see the Heartbreak Time Machine just saying, thank you, Greg. Haha, can't believe I didn't find it. Yes, that's what I was looking for. All right, so we see Madge Deeper's on. Wonderful to see you, Madge, and she's checking in from a very wet United Kingdom. So thank you for taking time out to join us today. All right, so we just see, hi, Greg, is there a way to automatically show/hide folder content in the mixer? In other words, if I'm closing a folder, the folder tracks in the mixer close as well. So it's not synced that way because, folder tracks can contain different tracks. But let's say if I have a folder track here, let's say for all my drums in this particular project, if you just go to the right of the folder and hold down the shift key and click, we could just, if we wanted to take a look, so let's say I'll just show all tracks. So if I wanted to hide the folder, we could just click here and all of my tracks, all of my drum tracks will automatically be hidden. It's not necessarily synced, but let's, because if we go, let's say if I come here, let's sync it to the project. So let me put this here and I have my drum tracks here. So I'll just change the size here so we could see it a little better. But if we go to our visibility settings, that if I hide the folder here, that it'll be hidden in the track. So once you click right here, you could just sync the project and the mix console. So that way that, if we want to take the entire folder and if we hide it from the visibility here, it will automatically correlate to the mix console as well. So just to the right of the visibility, you could choose which of the mix consoles, and you have 4 independent mix consoles, is synced with the visibility settings in this particular project. So let me know if that helps. Open up the project I just closed accidentally. All right, so I have a question from Harry. Hey, Greg, would you be so kind to show how to quantize an audio track, a drum loop automatically, or isn't it possible? So, yeah, you could definitely do it. All right, so let me just come here. I think I have a quick drum loop here that we could use. All right, so let's say I'll just open up my quantize settings here. So let's say, okay, I want to quantize this, and we want to make sure that your audio warp is set. So let's say, okay, I want to quantize this to 1/8 notes, and then as we quantize, we could just undo. So let's say, okay, let's do this to 1/8 note triplets. So let's say I want this to be to 1/4 notes, or straight to 1/8 notes. So you could just kind of, if you wanted to add more swing, so let's say, okay, let's add 80% more swing to that. So it's just selecting it, but make sure that you have the audio warp enabled. And then you should be able to kind of just quantize it just like MIDI data. So, all right, so we have Miguel Scott joining us. Thanks for being on the live stream. See, Michael Pierce is also indicating it's been a bit damp in the UK. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, I can change with the logical editor a couple MIDI notes, example an octave up or down, or transform all G minor sevenths to G minor, or delete all notes to sevenths. All right, so let's say let me just create some chords here in a chord track. Okay, so let's say I want to just drag these down to these parts, and I'll just glue them together so we could see it visually. All right, so let's say we go to our MIDI editor, and let's go to our logical editor here, and say, okay, we want to delete notes, and we can say position property is set to, let me just, context variable, I think is going to be equal to highest pitch. You could say number of voices in the chord, position in the chord, voice, and let's say, so you could say highest in the chord. So now we could just get rid of the sevenths. And I think that there's probably even presets. Let's take a look. I think that there's, so, and you could say, okay, you could say it's going to be the minor seventh, or, sorry, type is equal to note. Let's insert. Type is equal to, or context variable is equal to position in chord part, and we can say, okay, let's take the minor seventh. Context variable is equal to position in chord, and let's do the major seventh. So we could say set this to or, and then you could just delete the sevenths within chords like that. So again, you could just say delete notes that are major and minor sevenths. So I'll save that as a preset so I don't have to recreate it. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Michael Teams is joining us from Weatherford, Texas. Always wonderful. So I think the virtual ice cream distribution will begin. All right, so we have the artist known as Love checking in from New York, and he's hit the like button. All right, so we see kind words from Simon Lecrec Music Channel. Says Greg is amazing. So I just get to show amazing software. So a lot of the kudos should go to Steinberg and smart planning and development teams there. All right, so we see, hey Greg, I'm not understanding how to use VST Connect. So this is from Mr. Morpheus. It's a question. So what you want to do is to, what VST Connect is going to allow you to do is to actually have someone record remotely over the internet. So the person that you're going to be recording is going to download a program called VST Connect Performer. On a Mac and PC, it's free. I think it's $4.99 on iOS devices from the Apple from the Apple store. And then what you want to do, I don't have a secondary computer set up, but you want to create like a VST Connect. You can both sign in with your My Steinberg account. If you don't know, if the person doesn't have a My Steinberg account, you could click here and actually just get a number. And what you're going to do at that point is you'll see this person actually on, if they have a webcam, you could see them, and you could set up their audio interface and then basically record directly into your system. So And this will, once you create a VST Connect, this will set up your control room and all of the monitoring to make this happen. And then basically you hit play, your signal goes out from your session. The musician hears it, all the latency is compensated throughout the entire signal path. You record them directly into your session. And that way, wherever they're living, they could just simply record directly into your system remotely. So that's the concepts of VST Connect. All right, wonderful to see Pablo on the live stream. All right, so now we're just waiting for Gareth to have the whole Hot Mess group online. So glad you can make it. And Pablo's all happy to see Jan on. All right, Michael Pierce has started his ice cream distribution. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, is it possible to move selected tracks to an existing folder using the logical editor? Okay, so let me just... Let's take a look and see if we could do that. Okay, so let's say we have a folder, so just want to make sure it's an existing folder. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I need to set up a precondition. So let's say media type is equal to folder or container type. All right, and let me just say property is set to is selected. All right, let me just try a different approach. So say we're going to take, all right, I don't think there's generally kind of like a move. just look at. All right, so that creates it into a new folder. I mean, yes, I don't know a way of doing it, and I could maybe spend some more time over the weekend, but you could obviously just drag it into the folder track. But I could play around with it if you want to email me just as a reminder to see if I could maybe work on a combination macro project logical editor, but it doesn't seem like it's so hard to do, just manually with that. So. All right, so Pablo wants everyone to smash the like button. So. Okay, so we see from Best Green Jesus trying to hide the entire track/lane that has muted events. Okay. Okay, and this from Best Green Jesus. So it's. Okay, so let's see if we could do this. Okay, so let's. Okay, let's see if we could do this with some of the post. All right, so let's say if we have, so let's say we want to select and we'll say property is, let's say property is muted. And let's see if we go to preferences. And let's do a under editing. I think there we could maybe, let's see if we could do this where we could select, or maybe I'll do this as a pre-command. Okay, so let's see if we can do this where we're going to set a preferences to track selection follows edit selection. We're going to then select the events that should, and let me just see if, let's see if this works. Start with, so we're going to switch to preference in case it's not on to track selection follows event selection. We're going to select the muted events and then hide the selected channels. Okay. All right, and let me just check the status of the preference to start with. So we'll go to editing. Okay, so we have these events muted, so we'll apply. All right, let me try to switch the order. So say we have these two events muted. All right, let me just try that. Let's say if I have the track selected, and let me check the preference state. I'll just deactivate that and all right, and let me see if I could do a different one where, so now we have it selected that we want to see. So if we have it selected, that then maybe we could. All right, so I'll just save this as step one. And let's see if we could now build so say maybe we could build like a multi-stage project logical editor. So we'll say property transform, and we'll say media type equals, or property type is muted. Then let's see if we could I'll just try just a little bit and move on. Let's say parent object is selected. Yeah, if you want to email me best screen users, I could play around with it some more and see if I could maybe stage a couple of different, maybe a macro or multiple project logical editors to kind of do that. Sorry about that. All right, so you see Best Screen Jesus, just giving a shout out to Gary Gibbons for his new pad shop tutorial. So yeah, Gary's always amazing. So. Okay, so you just see from Into the Vault. Hi, Greg. I'm wondering if there's a preference to disable the auto record button every time you select a track. The red recorder always makes me worry if I'll record over something I didn't want to. Thank you. So yeah, if we go to Preferences and let's go to editing, and I think if you go to Project and Mix Console, you could enable record on selected audio track or enable record on selected MIDI track. So you could just disable those right there. So again, Preferences, Editing, to Project and Mix Console, enable record on selected MIDI track or enable record on selected audio track. See, Michael Teams is on with his ice cream distribution. It's always appreciated by everyone. All right, so we have Jeweler DeRocket checking in from Canada. Thanks for joining us. And we see Match Deepers was granted 1 gallon of French vanilla ice cream. All right, we have Camille Vesely checking in from Czech Republic. Ooh, see, Pablo has passed on coffee to Nick and hazelnut coffee. So, to myself. So it's very generous. Thank you. That's what I gave my wife before I proposed to her, some hazelnut gelato in Venice. It worked well. So. All right, so we're just seeing about the meters with the control room and the level seeming low. You know, so one thing you could always do, like a lot of times I do that, I'll just print a test tone. You know, Cubase says if you go under Others in plugins, you know, like when you have doubts, you know, oscillators are always good for this. So, you know, if you run into where you think that there's volume discrepancies, is, you know, just come over, we'll do a new project. And this is kind of an easy way to kind of rule out a lot of different things. So let's say on my mono in one, I'm just going to place and go under Tools, and you can go Test Generator. And I will just I'll create an audio track and we'll set it to, you know, be a mono track. And let's say from mono in one. And as I will just hit record here, and we can see that the settings on the plugin are at minus, when we open up the plugin here, we're going to be at minus 12 for 440 hertz. So I will just select this. So we know that this is minus 12 dB. So now at this point, I will hit P just to loop this, or hit Alt plus P. and just check, and once we have this, you'll see, okay, I should have minus 12 dB on the track, minus 12 dB here. And when I go to, let's say I move my control room down, and now I want to export. We'll do our export audio mix down. We'll do the stereo out. And I want this to be and we'll import this directly. After export, we'll just say import directly and create an audio track. And then you could, if you don't have it armed, that would be so helpful. Let's do export audio mix down. And now that when you look at all the levels, our exported track was the same level as our original track. So, and we combine them, we get more on the master. But you could always use kind of test tone generators to kind of test gain structure pretty easily. Okay, so you see Pablo is like number 138, so thank you very much. All right, so Michael Teens is granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Saturday in a Park ice cream. Such a great song as well. So love that era. I love that album of Chicago. Just Chicago 5, just amazing. See Pablo just spreading happiness on the chat field of the live stream. So it's great to have you back in. All right, so it just says, I saw you demo the MIDI monitor. Does not seem to register the mod wheel movement for a track. So it could, I think if you have like the mod wheel kind of mapped for other things, like in the MIDI remote, that it may not show. So it could depend on what's, if the MIDI remote is active for particular parameters, then that may not show up in the MIDI monitor because it's kind of taking the information into the MIDI remote. All right, so we have a question from Jeweler DeRocket. How to use the Q for one headphone to mix just the Q volume for that specific headphone only and to keep the mix volume the same? Okay, so I think I understand the question, so let's go ahead and just revert. Okay, so let's say I want to I come here and I have a Q mix in my control room. So let's say, okay, I have vocals, guitars, bass. Okay. So when I come, I will, let's say as we're playing this, I want to create a Q mix. So I'll come over here and I'm going to just right click kind of in the control room. And we'll say all Qs. And let's activate. I'm going to select all the tracks first. So I'll come here. So right click and let's activate all the Q sends. And then we could say, again, right click and say, let's use the current mix levels. So now when we're in our Q mix, we'll make sure we have our Qs active here. Okay, so now we have everything kind of assigned to the Q. So it says how to use the Q for one headphone to mix just a Q volume for that specific headphone only and keep the mix volume the same. All right, so if I'm here, let's say I'm looking at my vocal Q mix level. And let's say my control room level is here and I want to drop the headphones down for the vocal Q mix. So now when I switch to Q mix 1, so we could have that level decreased. So if you just click on the Qs, this way you could, if you want to make Q1 louder or softer, now you could just adjust the overall Q volume there. So you can have kind of the same mix, but this way you could have different levels. So if someone is, wants to monitor quieter, which is always a good thing, you could adjust individual levels. And let's say if someone is deaf, like say you have a deaf musician, you could just increase or decrease the Q mix volume directly there. So let me know if that makes sense for what you want to accomplish. So we see Inner Earth, that's 57 albums in Cubase created by himself or themselves in 21 years. That's congratulations. All right, Mr. Morpheus says, Greg, I uninstalled Apogee plugin trial from the computer, but it still pops up when loading Cubase. Is there a place in Cubase where they are hiding, locked, looked everywhere? So I'm not sure which plugin it is. If it's a VST3 plugin, it's generally going to be going into the VST3 folder. So if you come, I think you could just go directly to your VST plugin manager. And let's say, okay, it's a VST effect. So if we come over here, we could see the path for it. So if you're, sometimes, installing it and uninstalling it. So I'm not sure if it was uninstalled or if it's just something, but, this is the folder. You could see the folder path here where the plugin is. So if it's still kind of showing up here in the VST effects, you should be able to see the path right there. If it was, and this is for VST3 plugins, if it's a VST2 plugin that's showing up, go to the little settings cogwheel here. And at that point, you could see the VST2 plugin path settings, and you may be able to find it in one of those paths as well. Sorry, that's happening. It's always annoying. All right, so we have Rohan Joseph saying hello. So thanks for joining us. All right, so question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to save mixer configurations for explicitly selected tracks? When adding a track, it automatically becomes visible in all existing mixer configurations instead of being invisible. So yeah, it gets to be a problem if you have, so currently if you have a mixer configuration and then you add a track, it will show up in all of the other existing mixer configurations. And it's so that, I could see the design logic in either way, but currently, if we have, and just to kind of highlight this, let's say if I have this set for, I want to take selected tracks only. So let's say I just want to take these tracks and select these, and we go into we'll add a configuration. So we'll call this 1. And we'll just come over here and say, show only selected channels. And let's hide our inputs. Okay, so I wanted to save this. Let's update this configuration. All right, and let's say if we go to show all channels, and now I wanted to see these particular tracks. So we'll just add this as a configuration for 2. All right, and now once we have this, if we add a track, so let's add a couple of tracks. And we go back to our mixer, that these tracks are now included with the configuration. So, so I think the logic is that, we want it to be visible when adding the tracks. So that's just kind of how it works, but I know it's kind of annoying. And I'll make sure to kind of reiterate that to the development team again. So. All right, so we have a question from Step Keys. Can I make the MIDI editor open as a full screen window instead of always opening first in my lower part of the screen? In Cubase 5, it was automatic, and in Elements 12, it will open the other way. Thanks. Well, in Cubase 5, you didn't have a lower zone screen, but to do that, all you need to do, so let's say, and with any of the editors, let's say if I just is just go to your preferences, and you want to go to editors, and you say double click opens editor in a window. So hit apply, hit OK. So now when I double click on a part, it's now open in a window. So once again, so if I double click, it'll go directly to a window instead. So, so Cubase 5 didn't have the lower zone editor. So again, the preference, just go to preferences, to editors, and choose double click opens editors in a window as opposed to the lower zone. All right, so we see from Doughboy, I'm new to Cubase 12. Does it have a step sequencer? So, if you wanted to do step sequencing inside of, the editors themselves, we could do that. So if you wanted to say, okay, I want to put in quarter notes, and then we have this little step. So we could go into step input. So we could just come over here, double click. We see there's a blue line. So if I choose quarter notes and I just hit my MIDI notes, and if I say, okay, now I wanted to put in eighth notes. So you could just, or let's say, okay, let's do eighth note triplets. So you could, at this point, just say, and I need to do a 30-second triplet run starting on beat 2. So you could do that. There's also, if you wanted to do more for like beat programming, you could go to MIDI inserts, and you could come over here and have like a beat designer plugin. So if you wanted to kind of program different drum beats, you could do that. There's also just a step designer MIDI plugin that you could use as well. So if you wanted to just be able to do kind of different step sequencing, you could do MIDI plugins or just step entry mode in the key editor or drum editor. Okay, so we have from I am Rasmus. Hi, Greg. I have 3 monitors. First one for timeline, the second for the mixer, and the third for supervision. Is there a way to move between different workspaces but only affect the mixers and supervision? Okay, so all right, so say your project window on 1, mixer on 2, supervision on 3. Pretty typical. Okay, so when you move between different workspaces, so I'm not sure if the workspaces are kind of set up here. So I'm not sure if you're opening different projects. So if you have that set up, like that configuration with project window and mix console, and let's say your supervision meters. So let's say if we have like these different workspaces set up, where we could just kind of go back and forth. So I guess the question is there a way to move between different workspaces but only affect the mixers and supervision? So so let me know if you're working with different workspaces here, but you could have workspaces like when you go to add a workspace, they could be global or for the project. So you could have, like the mixer but the workspaces, like let's say if I come here and I have a big mixer workspace, and if I'm in a different project, that we'll still see kind of the same windows with similar parameters open. So say if I'm here, and then I go to my global workspaces and say big mixer, that's automatically reflecting what I saw in the big mixer here. So that's kind of translating between different projects regardless of channel configuration. So that way, once you save the workspaces globally, they should be able to be open and have the same parameters in different projects. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so Bruce Bruton just asking how everyone's doing today. So seems like everyone's in a good mood. Thanks for joining us, Bruce. And a quick response with strawberry ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, so Mark Rabin just posts a nice comment saying, "Hey, Greg, just really fast. Thank you, and thank you all, every one of you, for using and supporting the creative efforts of and stream. It's very kind, and we just do it because it's a wonderful community. I think it's a great way to communicate with customers and help people kind of realize their creativity." All right, so we see Sable Winters on. It's always better when Sable's on. Thanks for joining us. reading through different comments. All right. All right, my chat field just jumped. Sorry about that. Let me just. All right. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. So just reading through. See discussion and making beats. All right, so I just see a comment. It says sometime play some sec Viber audio, please. File completed, project completed. Give vibe for viewer, please. So I'm not sure if you want different, different settings when different aspects are done. So let me know if that's what you want. Like little, the export is done. Play a Bing sound or something. All right, so we see Lost Freak just saying he loves the new Cubase. That's great. All right, you see Michael Team says 175 likes already, so sounds great. I see lots of questions in my future here. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. So now we have the whole Hot Mess group. See Valley just saying he started using the test tone generator the second he opened up Cubase, so that's good. So we see, Greg, what's your thoughts on Ableton comparing to Cubase? Because I don't know what's wrong. 92% of electronic artists used Ableton. We don't have that Ableton has. So, I think, Cubase, I don't know Ableton well, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But, I think that, certain programs will put you, and I've just seen discussions of it, will predispose you to different workflows. And, I think Cubase is a much broader program that allows you to do a lot more. And it's not just genre specific. So if you're doing EDM or hip hop, or you're doing recording bands, you're doing classical music editing, you're doing soundtracks, you're doing sound design, that, Cubase is a wonderful tool for all those things. And, effective copy protection is also something that prevents you from getting into different markets. So, all right. All right, so we have Carlos Artura Proveda joining us from Colombia. Thanks for being here with us. All right, so we see a question. Is Spectral Layers free to those who own Cubase Pro 12? There is a Spectral Layers 1, which is kind of a subset of the features of Spectral Layers Elements or Pro. So there is a smaller version of Spectral Layers that comes with Cubase. So if you wanted to, just do like particular spectral editing, we could select an event or track even and just come over here and you could have Spectral Layers 1. So the Spectral Layers Pro or Elements is not included free of charge, but Spectral Layers 1 is. So now when you double click, you could do spectral editing directly in the sample editor. So, and Spectral Layers 1, a lot of people ask about separation. We'll do vocal separation from like a 2-track file. So if you wanted to separate the vocals and isolate it. So. All right, so we have a question. It says from Patrick Emmanuel A. It says, Greg, on Midi editor in upper corner, there's a note end and length. Can I use that to change length of Midi, but it's adjustable only to certain length? Can you please explain how it works? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so in the upper right-hand corner, but here, if you wanted to just adjust, so let's say I have this note selected here, and if I wanted to adjust the length of particular notes, we could just do that, or adjust the pitch. I'm just using my mouse scroll wheel, adjust the velocity of selected notes, the beginning and end. And if you're seeing that this is only going to particular values, it's maybe if you turn snap on or off that you could just, and I'm just using my mouse scroll wheel, but so if it's, so just kind of come here, and if you wanted to adjust, the pitch of all of those selected notes or the length of all the notes, you could just kind of do so, just whatever is selected. So, but if, it could be, like sometimes when we go to draw notes in, that we could have it snap to, let's say if I have my quantized value set to hold notes and I have snap turned on, it looks like we could still adjust everything kind of, as expected here. So if I wanted to change the length of all of the events, we could adjust, but like I may not be able to snap below the grid. So let's say if I turn the grid off, and you could do that by hitting the letter J, that we could now just come over here and just adjust the length of particular values like that. So let me know if that's what you're talking about, Patrick. All right, so Patrick just asks, how does Cubase come up with these ideas? Do you have composers in team, or you got and ask composers what they need? So we're constantly kind of in communication with composers and hip hop artists and rock bands, and every month at the end of the month I take I create reports based and send them into Steinberg because they monitor the live streams and we'll go through every single question. They'll review every single question that comes up in a live stream looking for trends, or it's like, oh, there's a lot of questions on this. Maybe we should change that. So, Steinberg does listen to their customers. Sometimes, customers may want something and it's like, okay, this is going to be, and they may not get it in the next version, but realize that it's going to be kind of a bigger, kind of more involved theme. Like a lot of people wanted like easier ways to do MIDI remote stuff quicker. So, but, and then, when version 12 came out, just kind of the depth of the new MIDI remote API and kind of setting a new paradigm for manufacturers to do the controllers and the scripts for that, and users to be able to custom configure how they want is a good thing. So sometimes, Steinberg does, take a lot of feedback from the market as well. All right. So just see from Lost Freak, just saying, I do have one comment as I have seen in Ableton. When I click on one of my tracks, I wish I could turn off all other track ads on. So I'm not sure if you wanted to turn the plugins off or if you wanted to maybe Lost Freak, if you could rephrase the question, maybe I could understand it and show it to you, or at least pass it on. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. John Koskian says, I think Greg just wrote a Frank Zappa song. So I get to help out Dweezil periodically. And I got to go to the studio at Frank Zappa's house, which is always fun, going into the vaults. See, Pablo is just saying everyone needs an extra screen to put supervision. So it's always a good choice, and you get two screens, put two supervisions on. So we see from Doughboy, Greg. So beat designers for drums. So yeah, beat designers like kind of a perfect tool for drums. So if you wanted to just come up with, I'll do a really horrible beat, but just to kind of show you how easy it is to kind of get started. All right, let me just... Okay, so let's say I will come over here to my MIDI inserts. I got, my drum kit. So let's get to the MIDI inserts, and we'll just load up a beat designer here. I'll just create a new pattern, just kind of show you how easy it is. So let's say we just have this. All right, so we could just kind of take, your multiple sources here. All right, I'll just start with brand new. All right, let me just make sure I don't have any of the patterns on. All right, I'll just do new project here to show you. Okay, and let's go to our beat designer. So if we want to make this, 16 beats, we could change kind of the length. So let's say, okay, we have 16 subdivisions. So say, okay, I want. You could adjust kind of the velocity. You could choose different sounds. So say, okay, I just want to throw in some. And then if you wanted to adjust swing independently, so you could just easily just kind of choose different sounds. So say, okay, I just want to come here and put in, and so you could just really fast and easily make beats. And if you wanted to drop this into the project, you could just say, okay, I want to insert the pattern at the cursor, and then you could just drop it right into your timeline or have it play perfectly in sync. All right, so we see from Solomon London, says, hello, Greg, great job you're doing again, as always, from you. Question, is there a way to make the lower zone resizable to almost zero? It looks like it doesn't let you reduce it beyond a specific height. Thanks. So, if you want it to be, often it's going to be set up so that, the lower zone is able to kind of show you relevant information. So, so if you have the zone activated, you can lower it to a certain extent, but you could always just come right there and just hide it as well. After a while, if you want it to be much less, it's not going to be, much shorter. It's not going to be a good experience as an editor, as a mixer, as a sampler, chord pads. So if you wanted to kind of minimize that, you could just come over here and just, hit the, I think it's, you could just tell it to show and hide the lower zone. So you could just do that via key command as well. But at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to have a lower zone that doesn't show anything really relevant for the lower zone. So, but if you want to hide it, you could just do key commands to open and close it. That's kind of really the intention of it. Okay. All right. So we have Avri checking in from Tel Aviv. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Michael Teams just saying it's 189 likes, so that's a lot. All right. All right. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm back. Okay, so you see from Doughboy says now I'll be able to load my own sound in those. So, if you have Groove Agent, you could take any sound or sample that you want. So, Beat Design, if it's with Beat Designer, Beat Designer just kind of sends MIDI information to particular instruments. But if you wanted to come over here, you could just, if you wanted to cut the kit and create your own sounds, you could just come right over here, right click on it. You can cut the kit and just drag any sounds over from Media Bay. So say, okay, I want to come to my EDM toolbox. Okay, I'm looking for snares, or whatever sound you want. So you can just kind of type in, okay, I'm looking for a kick. And let me just... So even if I just wanted to take, different loops or audio, we could just drag audio directly, even to say, okay, I want this audio, that's the bass, just to... So any file that you want to have, you could just come right over here and just drag any audio file from your project or from your media bay right in. And that'd be all you'd have to do directly there, so you can make your own sounds in Groove Agent super fast. Okay, so we see a question. When will 12.5 be out? 12 has just been out for about 6 months. So, often stuff will be on a longer life cycle. So we don't have any announcements for 12.5, but generally I'll be under non-disclosure agreement anyway, so I can't really share any information. But I think that Steinberg announced that it might be not doing 0.5 versions. That would be like 11 to 12 that we saw. That we didn't see 11.5, so it might go from 12 to 13 would be my speculation, but no idea when it'll be released. And realize that Cubase 12 is still fairly new. It's about 6 months old. All right, so I just see a question. What's going on with my MIDI input? So I have a CC121 controller that's on my system, and that sends MIDI active sensing information. So that's almost like a handshake saying, hey, I'm here, So that's just what you're seeing on the MIDI activity when nothing is going on. So a lot of controllers and Yamaha controllers do this a lot. We'll just have active sensing information, so you could just see that. All right, so we see Michael Pierce. He's going without soup today, but he had cauliflower with miso. So, all right, so we see from Jonah Ramirez, says, when are we going to be able to use Retrolog without the dongle? So Retrolog in Cubase 12 currently runs without the dongle. So if you are running it in Cubase Pro 12, it's already kind of working that way. So if you're running it as a standalone or in absolute, then that licensing still requires a dongle. But if you're running it inside of Cubase 12, you can run it without the dongle, without the USB-E licenser. So easy. A question from Patrick. Does Cubase have more features than Logic? How much would you rate Cubase comparing to Logic? Because I love Cubase more than any DAW I've used. In fact, all. So I don't, I've never really run Logic. So, but it seems like all their kind of new, when I look at, new release, new features that other companies release, it seems like, most of those features have been in Cubase for a while. So I think that you could always feel safe that Steinberg is kind of the innovative company that's defining the state of the feature sets. And they've been doing it longer than other companies. So so I don't know, I don't know the other competition, but when I see like press releases and new release information, it's like, oh, how did I not know that they didn't do that? So. All right, so we see Michael Pierce was saying the research to do polyrhythms in Cubase is very interesting because I was surprised how easy it was. So, all right, so we have Lord Schrader saying hello to all the Cubase family. So that's great. Thanks for being on. Okay, so there's further clarification about the workspaces. Says my problem is that when I zoom in a track, for example, and decide to move to another workspace where I have another mixer and supervision preset, the project windows change too, but I don't want that. Okay, so it seems like you only want workspaces for particular windows as opposed to all of the windows. So, I think with workspaces, if you have multiple elements, the workspace is kind of a global view so that everything would be the same. So, but I could see how like your zoom settings may change accordingly. But I think that's probably the best way to do it. There's a lot of ramifications and complications for not doing it where different things may not recall. But maybe there could be something like, a prioritized of not changing the size of this window or prioritizing only particular windows that I could pass along as a feature request. So. See, Cubase needs a hip hop ambassador, so it's there's a lot of Teddy Riley's and people like that are Daryl Pearson and there's a lot of Hannon Lane is doing a bunch of stuff as well. So there's a lot of hip hop guys doing stuff in Cubase. All right, so we see Rude Screen just saying he's late to the party and just saying hello. So no worries. You're just glad that you can make it. You just had to hit the like button. So. Okay, reading through comments. All right, wonderful to see Jean-Marie Horvat. If you're going to talk about people who are doing like all sorts of wonderful pop and R&B production. Jean-Marie is a good person to Google. So glad you could join us, Jean-Marie. All right, so we have John A. Walker just saying greetings from Cosmos Original Records. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see Superior Soundtracks just saying random question, but when will Cubase 12 Apple Silicon finally support the CC121? The controller is very important to my workflow. Thanks. I'll check with because the development of that's actually done by Yamaha. But I'll see if I could get an answer to see if it's what the plans are, see if I get any more updates on the CC121. Otherwise, that could be frustrating. It's such a great controller. I use mine every day. All right. So I just see from Patrick says, yes, it helped, but can you make notes 30-second triplets by adjusting values in the key editor left corner, as it would be more helpful. So if you're in a key editor, let's say you're doing, you want to see like the 30-second notes over to the left. If you want that, I mean, you could always just go to the setup here and choose, your quantize, and just simply move it up. So if you wanted that on the left-hand side, you could just, choose the value there for doing, different, doing your different values when doing step entry. So, if you need to move that visually over, go to the settings and then go to setup, and then you could reorganize the actual position of the different elements. Okay, so we have a question from Drums Powell Clark. Any information as far as recording a live drum set? So it's always great when you're able to do that with a great drummer. But, it's pretty easy to do inside of Cubase. So if you wanted to get set up, if we're doing like a live drum set, so like this project here is live drums. It's done my friend Fred Corey, kind of noted drummer, kind of did all this. But if you want to, and Pablo, who's on the live stream, does amazing drum recordings of his acoustic set at home. But, once we have, just naming sets, if you come over here and just hit the tab key, once you add the number of tracks, you can just hit the tab key, type in the name, hit the tab key, and have everything kind of set up. So if you know that on your bottom snare mic that you want to flip the phase, you could do that without having to instantiate different plugins. And once you, like, if you have kind of a, typical setup for, like this is my studio drum kit, you could come over here, right click, and save a track preset. So we could just call this, like as we want to work with this, we'll call it powwow. And we'll hit OK. So as we work with this, if I was doing a new project, and I was like, oh, I got everything perfectly dialed in for my drum sound, we could just say, and if you wanted to just go to media, say, oh, let's go to user presets, track presets, multi, and then we'll see powwow drums, and I could just drag and drop, and all my settings are just automatically carried over directly like that. So lots of great stuff that you can do for recording live drums. And then if you place everything into a folder, it's handy for this. I want to take all my drums. We could right click and put these, say, move selected tracks to folder, to new folder, and we'll call this our drum folder. And now I could just record and enable one track, and all of my entire drum kit could be record enabled, and we could just do all of our editing and tracking very easily like that. All right, my Chatfield jumped. Okay, so we have a question for Patrick. Greg, how to change settings like ARM only one track at a time, because I am in recorded track and when I move to make some changes, I armed that track. Both tracks are receiving message. So, if we, a lot of times if your preferences are set up, you could have this whenever you select a track that it will automatically record enable the track. So to not have that happen, go to your preferences, go to editing, to project and mix console, and now you could say, you'll see enable record on selected audio track and enable record on selected MIDI track. So if I hit apply, so right now I have this track selected, I could select a different track and it doesn't affect the record status of the kick track here. So with those preferences enabled, when I go to select a particular track, now that would set the record enable on that track, and you may not want that, so that's why it's a preference. So again, enable record on selected audio track and MIDI track, you could just disable those, Patrick. All right, I think we have 200 likes. That might be a record for our live stream. So that's great. Thank you for keeping me up to date, because I never get a look at the likes as I'm reading the comments, kind of separate. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. And no worries, I'm missing Friday's live stream. So it was great to have our 250th. So we see Gareth is asking if he's missed more giveaways. So maybe we'll do a Christmas giveaway. So get some more trivia questions. All right, so Sable Winters has just discovered Beat Designer, so it's wonderful. Gareth is looking for his free 1961 SG. All right, so we just see question from Drums Powwow Clark. How can I use my own live snare recording as a sample? All right, so let's close this. All right, so we have a tool called Groove Agent that's included with Cubase. So if we wanted to just come here, we could add track. Let's add an instrument track, and you get Groove Agent SE with Cubase. So now I don't have any sounds loaded, but let's say if I'm listening to this, I can now just take, like I have two tracks of my snare. So what I could do is just take my snare tracks here, I'm just going to grab my range selection tool, and then I could just drag them. And now at this point, I could, and I took 2 different tracks. So I have kind of top and bottom mics. And if I wanted to combine those, I could just say, okay, let's layer these. We could choose kind of like our sample start for each layer. So now as we do this, I can have both of them fire off. And if I wanted to take like my kick drum, I could select multiple kick drums, drag them down, layer these. Or you could have, up to 32 velocity layers as well. So if you wanted to, if you wanted 8 different velocity layers for your snare, you could do that and just assign it by velocity. So, but literally just drag and drop any section of an audio file you've recorded of your drum set right into Groove Agent, and then it's just going to respond to Midi. Gareth is just saying Backbones are a great toy. So yeah, if you're doing sound design and drum sound design, it's a wonderful tool. Right, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Jazzy Lamel, hey Greg, how do I know which stock plugins are mono or stereo and which ones are sizable? So any plugin that's VST3 will automatically, all the plugins, if you put it in a mono track, will be, if you put it as a mono insert on a mono track, or you put in an insert on a mono track, it'll be mono. If you put it in stereo track, it'll be stereo. So it just depends on the channel configuration. So, but all the plugins can be multi-channel. So whatever configuration you're in, that will automatically, the plugin will automatically adopt. So there's no need to have independent stereo and mono plugins. The same plugin can do mono, stereo 5.1 and, more extensive surround formats. As far as resizability, there's a few plugins that will have different components for resizing. But some of the plugins that Steinberg makes, like Halion, can be resized freely. But a lot of it is kind of set up to be kind of an optimum size in a particular plugin. Some will have different ways of hiding different aspects of the plugin. So let's say if I want to come here and let's take a look at like Quadrafuzz comes to mind, where you could open and expose additional windows and a lot of different plugins to kind of work with, different elements like that. But most of them will be kind of designed to work as a fixed size so that all of the relevant parameters that are, that are in that plugin will be available that you can see. Let me just clear my throat. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. Okay, just reading through comments. All right. All right, so just seeing, maybe I missed a comment for a question from the soundbar about content. Let me see if I saw something about contact taking a while to load. Okay, let's see if I could find it. All right, so I just see just a comment from Soundbar. It says, I told Contact where everything is, but then it loads forever. So, if, how long Contact takes to load up the samples is kind of out of the realm of what Steinberg can do. So it's just kind of independent. So it's kind of, the speed of that is dependent on how fast Contact loads up its samples and finds it. So, but let me know if I missed another part of the question from the soundbar. All right, so we have our question from Patrick. Just says, "Thank you, Greg. We love you, man." One more. Does the create drum map from instrument works only with Groove Agent? So I don't think it's a limitation in VST that does that, but I think Groove Agent's the only program that consistently works with. I've seen it work on a couple of Hallian instruments, but not all of them. But it's safe to say that it's going to be Groove Agent is the only one I know that really supports it. All right, so we just see a comment from Doughboy. It says, I know how powerful it is. You just need to dive deeper into Cubase 12, but coming from other DAWs such as FL Studio or Ableton, as a hip-hop producer and learning a new DAW is such a daunting task. It's harder to fly plane than to ride a bike, too. But, when you need to go 3,000 miles, it's best to go in a plane. Okay, so we have a question from Drums Powwow Clark. Show me how to create a sample from an imported audio file region. So, if you wanted to take any file that's in the project, you could just drag and drop. And you could just create that. Or if you wanted to just drag and drop directly. So if you have Groove Agent, you could do that. You could also just take different loops and say, okay, I want this loop, drag and drop it. Or so if you want to do that, or if you want it even simpler, you could just right click and say create sampler track. That will add a sampler track, and now we could just trigger that directly from Midi or drag and drop any audio event from the project window right into the sampler track. So a couple of different easy ways of doing it with built-in tools. See, Gareth is just curious what everyone is working on this week. So I just see Doughboy saying, even when I switched to Studio One, I found I had something easy to program drums and chord track, made it easy to lay down chords and melodies for leads. So yeah, Cubase has had that for 10 years or so. So. All right, so we have a question from William Milburn. Cubase versus Nuendo, what is better for what? So we could think of now Cubase is going to be a subset of features for Nuendo. So if you needed to do, and Nuendo is going to offer kind of more specialized tools. So if you do these particular types of workflows, these are often thousands of dollars of additional add-ons and are kind of susceptible to what I often refer to as version-itis, whereas a program gets updated and the third-party tools work differently and they're kind of completely out of sync. So with Nuendo is going to add, some additional like sound design parameter, like plugins and processes. So it's going to have like a randomizer plugin, a voice designer plugin for doing more work for like creating robotic voices. It's going to have some additional file formats like for dealing with dialogue for Netflix productions like TTAL. It's going to have more ADR functionality. So if you're re-recording all the voices that were done on set, and then you go into the studio where you see the actor just reading the lines into, often a beautiful Neumann microphone, handling all of the ADR functionality. If you do game audio production with, and you do a lot of work with Wise by Audio Kinetic, that, it's going to have Wise integration. So if you use that as your middleware for game audio production, it's going to have some more extensive surround support. So if you need to do multi-bed Atmos mixes, you needed to import ADM files. If you need to do reconforming of audio, where you've done an entire post-production mix and they cut out 3 seconds of a scene, you could just kind of easily take your project and conform that to the edit decision list from other programs. So there's a lot more like game audio and post-production features. If you're doing music production, Cubase and Nuendo will be nearly identical for that particular function. But again, once you get into more, I'm doing dialogue, I'm doing lots of non-linear based projects. I need to work with games. I need to do films. I need to be the one that's taking all of the music, the dialogue, the sound effects, and mixing that together in a post-production scenario. That's when Nuendo could be a better tool for that. If you're recording bands and doing music production, they'll probably give you the same experience. All right, so we see drums Powwow Clark just saying, I recorded a 36-inch powwow drum with singers. The dynamic level of the powwow drum is eminence. Talk about a challenge to mic and mix. Yeah, I can imagine that would be fun to get it in. All right, so we see from Jonah Ramirez, it says, I upgraded Cubase 12 and it's asking me for the RetroLog license without the dongle. So make sure when you go to Cubase 12 that, a lot of people downloaded the Cubase 12 but didn't update all of the programs. So all you have to do is probably go to the Steinberg Download Assistant. And from the Steinberg Download Assistant is just come over here and just install the latest version of RetroLog. So we'll show it to you. So when you go to your Cubase Pro download, just make sure that you actually just get the RetroLog 2.3 instrument. So make sure that you install that, and then it won't prompt you for the e-licenser dongle. So, and there's Pad Shop is the same way, Hallian Sonic SE is the same way, Groove Agent SE is the same way. So make sure you just download the latest versions from the Download Assistant utility under the Cubase 12, and then you should be all set. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we see from Sable, it says, I own Wavelab Elements 10 and Cubase Pro 12, current spectral layers, and Wavelab Pro Promo confuses two versions. What's the difference? Need reference track. And precision separation of parts in spectral layers too. So let me see if I could find the Wavelab promotion here. All right, so just take a quick look at it. As I noted, there's a current promotion. So I'm not sure if the promotion, okay, so let's see if we update, let's say from elements. So I'm not sure if the bundle is with the update. So let's say if we do, let's see if there's a separate bundle. So, and this might be a promotion that's running in other countries and maybe not the US. So let's take a look at the Wavelab elements. Yeah, so I think if you get a Wavelab Pro now, and I'm not sure if this is, so say we do Wavelab Pro, and that, you know, if you bought a Wavelab Pro at a discount, that it would come with the Spectral Layers Pro 9. So it's kind of a limited promotion with that. So the Spectral Layers Pro 9 would be the one that would do kind of the best separation. So, but if you want to email me a link as to what the other promo bundle is, Sable, I know I got your email earlier. I figured I would cover it on the live stream today. But feel free to send me like the other link as well about the two versions. All right, so we see a question. Let me just close this out. Does Cubase have a feature to drag and drop chords into the project like Studio One's chord track? I'm still learning how to play keys. So when we have a chord track, so it's not necessarily drag and drop, but you know, you just kind of click, so it's probably faster than dragging and dropping. But you know, and this is another thing that Steinberg kind of had done first, and you know, so we did this in version 8 long time ago. But you know, if you wanted to just, you know, come over here and let's just drop, you know, different chords in, you could come over and say, okay, I wanted this to be, you know, a D chord, and I'll choose a different voice for it to play through. So let's say, you know, and then the next chord I want it to be, let's say B. So you could just audition your different chords and just kind of drag and drop, and then you could have, you know, different parts automatically follow to the, you know, so if I want to take a Rhodes part and have that automatically follow the chords, you know, we could just come over here and say follow the chords and scales. So we could do that very easily, and we could have that, you know, automatically incorporate directly into the tuning as well. So if I want to take a vocal and have it automatically, you know, follow the chord track, we could do stuff like that as well. And when working, if you're looking for different chords, there's also a chord assistant. So you could look at a list of chords that will work kind of based on musical considerations or based on, you know, proximity. So you could audition. Or if you want to look at circle of fifths, so a typical way of coming up with different chord progressions. That's very popular as well. So even if you're not, have a strong background in music theory, you could still do this quite easily using the chord track. Okay, we see Pablo stepping out for dinner. All right, my chat field jumped. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. So we see from Patrick just asking, Greg, can you make a separate video explaining deep about Cubase logical editor features, like a logical editor masterclass? It's much needed. We'd love to watch. So I did like the new logical editing features in Cubase 12, some new stuff, but I'll make a note to, I'm going to be working on some more just like standard tutorials. So I'll make sure to kind of do some more deep dives into the logical editor. So thanks for that. So we see who copied Cubase better, Logic's or Studio One. I don't think either of them did it well. So, but I don't have any need to run a copy. So I don't run other programs, so I don't really need to. So, but I'm sure they have their fans. Okay, so we see from Spawny100 question. Hi, can you explain how to add external instruments the right way? I'm adding Midi and audio separately for every external synth. Maybe I'm missing something. So if you have Cubase Pro, if you go to, because, when you're working with external instruments, they always, the sound is being generated outside of the computer in the instrument itself. And that's how it used to always be. So people would have these huge mixers. I still have like 64 channels of mixers for all my external MIDI. It's what you had to do in the day. But now that we're running so much in the box and software based, people kind of take it for granted. And so what you need to do is to, when you have MIDI information, this MIDI information is going to be sent out. So we're going to have a MIDI track, and then we're going to send the MIDI out to the device via the MIDI output port. So we would just kind of see like the track list we'd see here. We're going to send it out to, this instrument or to this MIDI output port. That instrument generates the sounds as audio, and the audio for a lot of people was sent directly to a mixer to be combined with other external instruments. So now what we could do instead of that is a lot of people want to use their VST effects, like the same reverbs as they have on their virtual instruments, as they want those available on their external instruments. So to do this, what we could say is we're going to basically connect the inputs, the audio outputs from the external instrument to two inputs. So a lot of people would just have a track that would always be an audio track that was monitored and pass the audio back in. So what you could do is if you go to the studio menu and go to audio connections, you could add an external instrument. So let's say I have a Yamaha Montage. I want to define exactly where it is connected into my audio interface. So let's say, okay, I have this connected into inputs 1 and 2. And now, to simplify the process so I don't have to add a MIDI track and an audio track, I could, Once that input has been defined from the output of the instrument, we could add an instrument track just like we would, and then we would see external, and we click on under the external plugins, and now I just click on add track, and now I could have one track where the audio and MIDI information are consolidated together. So go to the studio, to audio connections, and go to your external instruments. You could add external instrument and define its inputs and outputs, and then just open it like a plugin from the instruments from the external category. And that way you could have kind of just one track. All right, so we see we're at 204 likes, 205 likes. It's wonderful. Thank you. All right, Michael Teams just says, I learn something every time. Thanks, Greg. What a great resource for help. So I'm glad it's helpful for people. Gareth is just saying that Groove Agent is a feature-laden monster. So. See, Graham Witcher is just saying, wow, revelation today. I did not know you could drop into Groove Agent like that. And Demir's G is just saying, Greg, thanks for the drum user preset thing. Love it. So yeah, if you have like a different studio scenarios, it's always a great way to be able to access those different settings. So I just see from Mr. O says, I wish you could drag and drop samples from outside Cubase into Groove Agent, like drag and drop from the Splice app into Groove Agent. So let me just see if I have, so I don't have this, I don't have this Splice app. So, but you know, let's just see if we come here to this instrument, and oops, sorry. All right, so say if I just have this on my desktop, all right, let me just see if we could. So like I could just do it directly from Finder. So I'm not sure how the Splice app works, but you know, I could just do it directly from my Finder Explorer and drop it into Groove Agent. So I'm not sure how this, you know, I know of the Splice app and kind of in context what it does, but you know, make sure you try it because you could do it direct, you know, so maybe it's a limitation in the Splice app, but you know, if you could do it just from like Finder or Explorer right into Groove Agent, seems like if that works, then other things, it's not a limitation of Groove Agent. right, just reading through more comments. All right. Yeah, so just see from Mr. O, every time I try, I think dragging something from outside Cubase to VST just closes. I have to put it in Cubase and then drop it into Groove Agent. So it seems like it worked for me, but let me know if you're doing it a different way. See, Gerald Ely saying the plane analogy was great. I'm glad that was helpful. We see Captenergy music like that too. So my bass professor in college, he was always saying, the power of analogy is really good. All right. So Peter just asked, in the last Club Cubase live stream, you created a project logical editor to enable/disable tracks in a folder. That was much appreciated. Once created, can a macro be assigned to said project logical editor? So you could just come over to any of the project logical editors if you wanted to assign a keyboard shortcut to it. Go to key commands. And then when you come over here, you'll see Process Project Logical Editor, and then all the user key commands. So you could just simply see them all here, and you could assign user definable key commands for any presets that you've created for the logical editor under Process Logical Editor or Process Project Logical Editor. So those can all be accessed and just executed from a control surface using the MIDI remote or anything else you want, or assign a keyboard shortcut to it. All right, so we see a comment from Drums Powwow Clark saying, great show, thank you. Seeing discussion of early Pink Floyd and Mike Oldfield stuff. So yeah, I was playing my son Side 2 Dark Side of the Moon for his first experience, and then he picked out how to play Money on Bass as a 9-year-old. So so Val Lee's just saying, can we all take a moment and appreciate the very audio editing? So yeah, I thought Steinberg did a great job with that. I think it was in 12 when he kind of updated it. So I kind of hounded them for a lot of workflow stuff, and I thought they did a great job with that. See, Gareth is just mentioning he misses albums that draw you in and have to listen to all the way to the end. So yeah. Okay, a question. Is it possible to label recordings with the project name as well as the name of the track? Thanks, Greg. So while you're exporting, so if you wanted all of the files to be recorded, so there isn't, Nuendo has this function where you could just, do kind of a batch rename. But if you're doing an audio mix down, what you could do is, let's say you're doing multiple files. Let's say you're doing multiple instrument and audio tracks. And if you go to the naming configuration here, we could just say, okay, I want the name, the project name, and, channel type and channel like that. All right, and then so in the actual, when you go to the actual files, there's a naming scheme when exporting, so that you could include the project name But Nuendo does have a function where you could just, add prefixes and suffixes to all of the files in a particular project. And that functionality isn't in Cubase, but I'll mention it. There's kind of different levels of it, but it would be nice to also have inside of Cubase. All right, so Root Screen just saying, can Club Cubase be renamed to Greg Undo Appreciation Society? I think it's all really appreciation of what Steinberg does. I just get to be a communicator of what Steinberg does. So, but I appreciate the sentiment. All right, so I see that Sable sent an email about it. I'll reread the email and try to get back to you tonight before I close out for the weekend as I'm doing my live stream, Sable. Sorry about that. So let's take a look at it for Sable said it's under. And I think this is tempting Gareth, so we'll. Okay, so say we'll buy Wavelab 11 Pro, and Sable is just saying updates and upgrades. Okay. All right. Okay, let me just look at. So I don't see if this is where the bundle was. Sable, let me know if this is the correct window that you are on. All right, so we just see a question. Please demonstrate Atmos with headphones and 2 monitors. So, if we wanted to do, so you want to make sure, that your project is at 48K. So I'll just do a quick. Just jump over. So I may have to convert this. Let's see. All right, so we want to make sure that your project's at 48K. It's just how Atmos works. So I will go to my project setup and I'll just convert this. All right, and I'll just choose no there. So let's come over to our audio setup. So we want to make sure you're 48K and that your buffer size is set to 512 on your audio interface. So we have that set for the number of samples for the buffer. And at that point, we want to get a project and just say ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos. And then we go to the setup assistant, and basically we could add a main mix channel, we could add a bed and route all the tracks to the bed, just kind of do the default settings. And then we just want to come over here and, if you're listening in, with stereo speakers, you could choose 2.0, but if you're listening with headphones, you could go to binaural. So now as you want to come over and do different elements, so I'll take this track and let's open up the panner, and now at this point we can just kind of switch over, let's say, if you have headphones on, so we could add different height. So this way it's actually doing the binaural mix down, so you could kind of get a sense of what's going on. So if we wanted to place this kind of in our sound like it's behind you. And all these settings and pannings could be saved, and then once you're done with that, we would just go directly to the ADM authoring setup, and at that point you could export the ADM file just like that. So just see from Patrick, can you mention some producers who fully use Cubase for production, like Ian Kirkpatrick? Lots of people. We get into on the rock side, like Michael Wagner. We have, Teddy Riley. We have Zed. There's, tons of composers. The Hans Zimmers, the Harry Gregson Williams, the, Ludwig Göransson. Pinar. If you get into like the countryside, you have, Chuck Ainlay, Gary Pachosa, Bob Bullock. But, there's just tons and tons of different people. Chris Rodriguez does a lot of Latin stuff. We had Clay Oswald, who's won, just Grammys and American Music Awards and doing stuff on Broadway. We have David Kahn, who does a lot of work with Paul McCartney and, did Walk Like an Egyptian way back when. So, there's tons of people using Cubase all the time. All right, so we see drums. Powwow Clark says, first year music theory still haunts me. So it's not so bad. So Gareth just comments, only Greg could be dismissive and diplomatic at the same time. Well, I do live in the Washington, D.C. area, so it's kind of a geography thing. All right, so Solomon London asks, is there any faster way of doing chord voicing inversions right from the chord track? So let's go ahead and take a look. I'll show you, I think if we go to this project here. Okay, so let's come over here to chord track. And I'll just activate the Rhodes so we can hear it. So say, all right, so you see the voicing right here in the info line. So you could just, right from the info line, be able to adjust different chord voicings. So you can give that a try right there. So same chord, but just different voicing inversions for that. So let me know if that's helpful. So we see from Patrick, how much time would it take to get fluent with Cubase? What's your thoughts? It really could depend on, if you're doing, realize that, Cubase is something that everything plugs into. So, it could be like, you might have to learn your Midi controller. There's people that jump into it very quickly. Like when and I've told this story probably numerous times, but, the thing that attracted me to Cubase when I got it, 31 years ago almost, is, I got it, I was in college and I got it on a Sunday night. And without reading the manual, I did a whole project the next morning for my college professors who were ironically teaching me about MIDI production, and they were hiring me to do MIDI production, projects for them. And I got through the whole thing and made $150 profit on the first day. So I was like, oh, I like Cubase for that. But it's obviously grown a lot since then. But you don't have to tackle every single feature, but have the comfort of knowing that when you need a particular feature, that Cubase will probably have it without any issues. So, you don't have to learn everything, and people are going to learn at different rates. Has anyone mastered piano or guitar? Just when you think you're a great guitar player, you go watch a video of Alan Holdsworth, and it's just like a completely different world. So, but you can get working very fast and get stuff done. And as you need to do more depth of editing and more depth of features, you can have the comfort that Cubase can handle it for you, but it's not always going to be just like pounding you in the face that you have to do it this way. So, and everyone's going to learn kind of different speeds as well. But if you watch a lot of the live streams, you could learn lots of, people will learn, maybe 10 tips. If you watch, 4 hours and learn 10 great tips, and you search through Jan's CubaseIndex.com. When you want to figure something out, just come to a live stream and ask or search for the databases of it. Okay, so I see question. So for my Tascam DP32SD effects send, can I use Cubase as part of the effects send back to my Tascam? Let me just check what on the Tascam unit. So I'm not sure. These are usually pretty standalone. Not sure if it works as an audio interface as well. Yeah, I mean, if it works as an audio interface, you could kind of, get in and out of it. But a lot of those have kind of limitations because they don't want you to kind of go into software because you may not buy much hardware after that. All right, so a question from Pablo. Is there a way for the listen button to always be AFL? So when you go, you could set it. I think that this setting will always, and if you're not familiar with this, if you go to the main area here on the control room, so if you want to go to the listen bus to be after fader or pre-fader, I think that will just stick until it's modified. So let's say if I do a new project and we go to create empty and we hit OK, that setting will stick until it is modified, because this isn't necessarily stored. Those settings aren't stored as part of the project. It's kind of project independent. So if you just leave it there, the editing features in Cubase. So, if you have noise, Cubase doesn't have any kind of built-in noise, like, or restoration tools. Wavelab does. Some people, if you have the full Spectral Layers Pro, that has some really high quality, find the noise and be able to isolate and filter out, the particular noise aspects of an audio file. And maybe I could show that here quickly. Let me just import an audio file. So let's say if I have something that's a lot of noise and I wanted to use like Spectral Layers Pro for this, I'll just come over here. I think you could do it with Spectral Layers Elements as well. So now I'll just take this whole project, and what you're able to do is just kind of find a particular noise floor. So let's say probably a lot of the information like around here. Let's just listen to, so I want to take out some of the musical, just kind of the hiss. And then what you're able to do is if you come over to process, we could just say let's get a noise reduction. I want to register that noise. And now as we play, we could just say, okay, I want to do my noise reduction. And we'll just apply it. Whereas before, it was, much, so if we wanted to go back and undo the settings, you could just kind of hear that difference. So, but that's a kind of an add-on tool, but that's, it's a great way of doing kind of restoration. So, check out Spectral Layers Pro because it does that and so much more. All right, so we see Val Lee just saying you can drag and drop outside splice. You need to be running it in and Cubase in administrator mode. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Val Lee. All right. All right, so you see from Jazzy Lamel, it just says, hey, Greg, speaking of MIDI, I have several rack modules. I would like to have the names of the sounds in those modules come into Cubase for easy programming. Can you tell me how to do that? All right, so let's come over and let's go to your studio setup, or I'm sorry, that's not there. It's going to be studio menu. And then if we come to MIDI device manager, so we can say, okay, I want to install device. So let's say, I wanted to have my Yamaha motif. I could say, okay, let's come over. I have this and it's assigned to this MIDI port. So now when I go to add a MIDI track, I'll activate the project first. That would be helpful. So let's go to add a MIDI track. And now, so we'll come here and then we'll choose, okay, we should probably see our Yamaha motif, ES rack. And as soon as I click here, let me just, there's all of our banks for the motif. So that's how you could kind of get it set up. And a lot of those scripts can be downloaded from manufacturer websites as well. See Gareth just saying my son Ryan has to play on the next Hot Mess tune, so I think he would like that. So. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so we see does the M Audio Oxygen 49 can be used with the Cubase 12 MIDI remote? I guess it's the MRI's MIDI remote integration. So anything that transmits MIDI, you can configure to work with the MIDI remote. So there may not be, you may have to kind of do the, like when I hook up my Korg Nano Control 2, I could just come over here and it was automatically recognized. So the user may have to, create scripts, and you basically kind of mimic, what the, controls are, what the physical layout is. And then you just, basically assign those particular controls to different elements. But anything that transmits MIDI back and forth, no problem. All right, so we have Lyndon checking in from Manila, Philippines. Thank you for being on and joining us. Or is this probably very early or late? All right, so we have a question. It says, you just changed the sample rate in a project from 44.1 to 48K. Cubase asks several questions. What does the last question mean exactly? All right, so it asks if you want to keep things at their sample positions. So as we do the audio, if we wanted the audio to stay at the same exact sample position in the project, we could do that. It's often not a good choice. And, for the most part, I would think that would be like, you wouldn't want that to be the default, like hit enter and kind of plow through the features. But I know Michael Pierce always asks about it. And I was doing some project where where the one time I didn't want it to actually change the sample positions, but I can't remember what situation I was in. But that basically allows you to have the audio moved to its musical position without maintaining it at its sample, at the same sample position of the audio. So, but generally just remember, if you want it to play back in time at the new sample rate, just choose no for that. All right, so Robert Higgins is saying, what do you recommend as a standalone stereo editor? I use SoundForge at the moment, but would like something better. So definitely Wavelab is going to be like the best solution for that. And It's going to be on Mac or PC, and it's a wonderful stereo audio editor, mastering, audio restoration, forensic audio, all sorts of great stuff. All right, I think we had one question. Let me get to that. I think we answered the one, but I want to make sure we get to it before the live stream ends. All right, give me just a moment. All right, it says, Greg, I've done this procedure before and I can't get it to work after watching many tutorials. This is a simple task. If I change the tempo of 3 audio tracks while keeping the bars... So this is a simple task. Change the tempo of 3 audio tracks while keeping the bars properly aligned. MIDI tracks are not involved. I've set tracks, events, in the pool to musical mode. Changing the tempo either doesn't change the tempo or doesn't keep those 3 tracks aligned. Bars are not aligned. What am I doing wrong? Okay, so let me just jump to this project. So you want to make sure first that all of the tracks have... we'll have a tempo stamp. So when we go to look at the tracks in the pool, we can see that they have a tempo stamp, and then that will have, we want to make sure that this is, roughly correct, that, in Cubase will automatically embed a tempo stamp for you as you record audio files based on the project tempo while recording, and then that they're placed into musical mode. So we want to make sure that not the tracks, just the tracks, but the events themselves. So sometimes if you come over here, select all 3 tracks, select the events, and make sure that the events are in musical mode. And you should see this little event right here as opposed to the track. So the track can be in musical or linear mode, and you could have a track in linear mode, but the track's in musical mode, and it may not work. So now that we've done this, I play my project, and I could type in any tempo, and the bar beat relationship will change, but it's just going to play back at different tempos. So make sure that the events, the tracks, and that are both in musical mode, and that you actually have the correct tempo information as well. So let me know how that works out. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. All right, give me just a second. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Just see Cubase saying, "Oh, no way, there's voicing there." So yeah, I think that's probably with the chord track. I'll give you that feature free for showing up for today's live stream. All right, so we have a question from Lyndon. Can you demonstrate, let me just clear my throat. Can you demonstrate way back how to display automations like CC11 and CC1 in the piano roll in the project view? Can you do that in reverse from the project window to the piano roll? Okay, so let's take a look. I'll just do new project. Okay, so I'll just draw in some. All right, so let's say if we come here, Some of this could be contingent upon, so let's say if we go to volume and so then I could say, okay, let's do MIDI controllers. So let's say, okay, channel 1, I want this to be modulation. And let's say when we come here to more, so MIDI controllers, let's say channel 1, we want this to be CC7. So now when I double click and we say, okay, so at this point we'll say, let's find modulation data. And let's look for volume. All right, let me see if I draw in volume there. Let's say modulation. So, and it could be contingent upon when you go to like how you want those to be represented. If you go to the CC automation setup, that you could pick whether these are, automation or MIDI tracks when you do this. So that is contingent upon it as well. All right, so you see from Drums Powwow Clark, there are effect sends on the back of the Tascam. So you might be able to route the audio from the Tascam recorder out to Cubase. So you could give it a try, but it may not be totally designed for that purpose, but you could probably send audio out and back. It may be limited to mono outputs, so be aware of that. All right, gonna check the time. We got just a couple more minutes. All right, so I just see a question as I was scrolling back. Thank you. Does Wavelab use VST plugins? So yeah, it has since version 1. So you can definitely run all your VST plugins since Steinberg invented it. Invented the whole technology. Smart Charlie Steinberg guy. All right, so we see from Mr. O, do you guys gals think Steinberg will ever fight to bring back Rewire? So, it's kind of an abandoned technology from Propeller Heads or Reason Studios now. So it's really, they chose not to update it or support it on operating systems and computer chips. So it's, so there's not much of a future in it, but, I'm sure we would love to keep doing it if it was still being developed. But if it's not going to work on computers going forward, it's kind of a tricky thing. So. All right, so we have a question from Leon Vink. It says, thanks a lot for the live streams. Questions. When I cut a MIDI channel in the project window, deletes the notes that are continuous over the cut. Can I let Cubase also cut the notes? So yeah. So let's say I'm in this project, and I have a long note, and it's a preference. So if we come over to preferences, I think it's under editing, Midi. There's a split Midi events that can be checked. So check that. And now when I split this event here, it'll actually be a Midi note that starts, that's right there and continues on starting at that point. So again, go to preferences, editing, Midi, split Midi events. All right, so with that, I think we're out of time. I want to make sure that we have enough time for all of the closed captioning in different languages. I want to thank everyone for the great questions. Thank you so much. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we will be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So we look forward to seeing that, and thanks again for questions, and we'll see you then. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.